The Honorable Mr. Weli Ardiansyah, my beloved friends, and everyone who watched this video, good day. In this good opportunity, I would like to explain about sampling, especially about types of non-probability sampling. What is sampling? In research terms, a sample is a group of people, objects, or items that are taken from a larger population for measurement. The sample should be representative of the population to ensure that we can generalize the findings from the research sample to the population as a whole. What is the purpose of sampling? It's to draw conclusions about populations from samples. We must use inferential statistics to enable us to determine a population's characteristics by directly observing only a portion or sample of the population. We obtain a sample of the population for many reasons, as it is usually not practical and almost never economical. Non-probability sampling refers to sampling techniques for which a person's likelihood of being selected from membership in the sample is unknown. Because we don't know the likelihood of selection, with non-probability samples, we don't know whether a sample is likely to represent a larger population. But it's okay. Generalizing to a larger population is not the goal with non-probability samples or qualitative research. That said, the fact that non-probability samples do not represent a larger population doesn't mean that they are drawn arbitrarily or without any specific purpose in mind. To draw a purposive sample, a researcher selects participants from a sampling frame because they have characteristics that the researcher desires. A researcher begins with specific characteristics in mind that she or he wishes to examine and then seeks out research participants who cover that full range of characteristics. For example, if you are studying mental health supports on your campus, you may want to be sure to include not only students but mental health practitioners and student affairs administrators. You might also select students who currently use mental health supports, those who drop out of supports, and those who are waiting to receive supports. The purposive part of purposive sampling comes from selecting specific participants on purpose because you already know they have characteristics. Being an administrator, dropping out of mental health supports that you need in your sample. Quota sampling is another non-probability sampling strategy that takes purposive sampling one step further. When conducting quota sampling, a researcher identifies categories that are important to the study and for which there is likely to be some variation. Subgroups are created based on each category, and the researcher decides how many people to include from each subgroup and collects data from that number for each subgroup. Let's consider a study of student satisfaction with on-campus housing. Perhaps there are two types of housing on your campus: apartments that include full kitchens and dorm rooms where residents do not cook for themselves and instead eat in a dorm cafeteria. As a researcher, you might wish to understand how satisfaction varies across these two types of housing arrangements. Perhaps you have the time and resources to interview 20 campus residents, so you decide to interview 10 from each housing type. It's possible as well that your review of literature on the topic suggests that campus housing experiences vary by gender. If that is that case, perhaps you will decide on 4 important subgroups: men who live in apartments, women who live in apartments, men who live in dorm rooms, and women who live in dorm rooms. Your quota sample would include 5 people from each of the 4 subgroups. Researchers can also use snowball sampling techniques to identify study participants. Snowball sampling is sometimes referred to as general sampling. One research participant refers another, and that person refers another, and that person refers another. Thus, a chain of potential participants is identified. In snowball sampling, you begin by identifying someone who meets the criteria for inclusion in your study. You then ask them to recommend others who they may know who also meet the criteria. Although this method would hardly lead to representative samples, there are times when it may be the best method available. Snowball sampling is especially useful when you are trying to reach populations that are inaccessible or hard to find. For instance, if you are studying the homeless, you are not likely to be able to find good lists of homeless people within a specific geographical area. However, if you go to that area and identify one or two, you may find that they know very well who the other homeless people in their vicinity are and how you can find them. Finally, convenience sampling is another non-probability sampling strategy that is employed by both qualitative and quantitative researchers. To draw a convenience sample, a researcher simply collects data from those people or other relevant elements of which to which she or he has most convenient access. This method, also sometimes referred to as availability sampling, is most useful in exploratory research or in student projects in which probability sampling is too costly or difficult. If you have ever been interviewed by a fellow student for a class project, you have likely been a part of convenience sample. While convenience samples offers one major benefit, convenience, they do not offer the rigor needed to make conclusions about larger populations. A basic example of a convenience sampling method is when companies distribute their promotional pamphlets and ask questions at a mall or on a crowded street with randomly selected participants. Businesses use this sampling method to gather information to address critical issues arising from the market. They also use it when collecting feedback about a particular feature or a newly launched product from the sample created. All in all, non-probability sampling techniques are a more conducive and practical method for researchers deploying surveys in the real world. Although statisticians prefer probability sampling because it yields data in the form of numbers. However, if done correctly, it can produce similar if not the same quality of result. And also, getting responses using non-probability sampling is faster and more cost-effective than probability sampling because the sample is known to the researcher. The respondents respond quickly as compared to people randomly selected as they have a high motivation level to participate. Well, that's all about my explanation. Thank you for your attention. Good day and see you.